my experience, and I think this is probably more a management lens than psychology, but we have a tendency never to look at the user as actually even partially a person. So, really, it's an object, it's a thing, it's something that it's something that we've created. It might be a persona, but not in the sense of design thinking, but we feel like we know what it is. Oh, we're targeting to 40-year-old housewives who do this, this, and this. And so there's kind of this assumption that we know who that person is. And we know characteristics about them. We've studied them in consumer behavior. And so based on this, we design with that in mind. And I think that you miss so many opportunities because there are many things that we create that we don't need. And there's so many things that we do need, but we don't even realize we need it. And I think when you design for the whole person and you see people's, as Allison pointed out earlier, your frustrations, your pain points, we do a wallet challenge. And it's so interesting because a lot of people don't even carry wallets anymore. Their whole purse is their wallet. But just looking at how different people use something as simple as a wallet in so many different ways with so many different desires and needs out of it. And to think that we haven't seen a change in how a wallet is made in a long time. And so it really is understanding that there's so much more that many different people might want that you can think about and design for. And it really takes understanding that we're not kind of cookie cutter, that you can't group everybody into these, groups of assumptions and data and assume that, that's how I'm going to act versus how Allison's going to act in the same situation. So I think you have to, in order to really apply design thinking effectively, you have to be able to stand back and say, I need to know more about my user than their demographics and age and some of the stereotypes and assumptions we make about their behaviors. So I think that's one approach to your question.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely correct, because I think what Lori is kind of tapping into is that sometimes we shortcut. We put people into this category, we stereotype it, we wash away all the individual difference and the nuance. And often, maybe in business as usual, we take on these quantitative or survey approaches where we say, oh, this is what 70% of our customers do. And so we're just going to wash away the outliers. We're going to focus, on the center of that bell curve and, design for the middle. And in design thinking, the approach is drastically different, where you are conducting naturalistic observation whenever possible. You're looking at, trying to do this kind of fly on the wall observation about what do people actually do in authentic settings when they don't know that they're being studied, right? Because then you get different than a survey response. You see an actual behavioral artifact, and that happened, and they did that. It's not just something that they sort of edited and packaged and wrote on a survey or that they told you about. And then we also do these interviews where, in some cases we're tying that back to what we saw. But in other cases, we're just focused on one individual and what we can learn from that one individual versus, 2,000 who took a survey. And by focusing on the individual, it just really unleashes all of these different opportunities for these users to articulate their needs, right? So some of the approaches that we use and we teach are things like the 5 whys. So if you ask a user a question, you might say, so what did you do for lunch today? And they answer that question and they say, I just ate out of my car. Oh, why did you eat your lunch out of your car today? Well, because I was on the go, just, in between meetings. Oh, so, why did you just keep going, all these different layers. And the idea is to uncover not just the behavior, not like kind of the superficial answer, but what is driving their behavior? What's the root cause of their behavior? And so these interview techniques, which in some methodologies kind of get this bad rap for being soft or something, are really analyzed deeply. And we go oftentimes for depth over breadth to really get down and nail down what is important. What do these people value? What are their priorities? What are their beliefs, their feelings, passions? And often we're interested in that beyond the realm of whatever product or service we're designing. So in these interviews, if we're interviewing them about a vacuum cleaner, we don't only talk about cleaning, right? We say, tell me your typical day, walk me through what yesterday was like, because we need that broad context, not just this kind of narrow view that you might, again, pick up on a survey or a focus group. So I think we have some really neat techniques that we use in design thinking to really value the full person. And we find that people who engage in what we call these empathy interviews find it very rewarding, both if you're the interviewer. I mean, we often don't take the time to sit down and just have a nice conversation like we're having right now, actually, right? And we don't, this is so fun, and we don't normally get a chance to do this. And then the interviewees often feel very valued that you're taking the time to ask them what they think or feel about something, or that you would even care about their life or their priorities and whatnot. So I think those are some of the things I would say. And then one other kind of caution about sort of the typical approach of giving a survey is, in design thinking, we say that people often say one thing and do another. And so if you only rely on what they tell you they do, then you may be getting some lies. That's scandalous, I know, but you might be getting some lies. So we often talk about this example of, if you go to get a physical and the physician says to you, okay, on average, how many alcoholic beverages do you have in a week? We say, so what do most people say? Well, most people, Lori, what do most people say?
I only have one or two.
I only have one or two, right? And so, yeah, some people are telling the truth. They have one or two. And then some people who are still drunk, are like, I just have one or two. And then other people who are, have completely abstained from alcohol for the last 5 years and don't want to say zero because they're worried that might signal that there is some issue with alcohol, they'll still say one or two. So we kind of learned that that's what's socially desirable for us to say. And what that means is, we are giving biased responses, which means now the designers are using faulty data, really, to design for something that's not actually a true representation of that person's behavior. So I think, fully agree with what Lori said, that there's kind of this danger in merging everyone into these very large categories. And so this approach in design thinking, where we do hone in and really value deeply the experience of many isolated individuals, and then we put all those data points up on the wall. We call this bottom-up processing. And so we say, oh, we had this interview with Mike and this interview with Sarah, and we look at all of it together, and then we start to connect the dots and make meaning, instead of saying, oh, well, we know our customers think this, so let's ask them more about that, right? Which would be the top-down.
And it's funny, Allison, when you were talking, the one example I actually love, and it's not an interview, it's just observations, is the putting in the curb brakes. Mm-hmm. I want to say Toronto, right? Is that Toronto? Yep. It's more Allison's story. She had it in training. But they talked about the fact that, we design for specific users sometimes without thinking more broadly. And so if if you're going to poll the public, like, oh, we're going to go and put these little slots into the curb so that people who are in wheelchairs can easily go down the curb onto the road and cross the street. Wouldn't that be great? And people are like, oh my gosh, no one's going to want to use it. That's so much money. But if you piloted it like they did in Toronto, and then sat and just observed who used it, it wasn't just people in wheelchairs. They found that people who were pushing strollers, and people who were on a bike, and people who had a walker. And I mean, there were myriad different users for this small kind of feature in the sidewalk. And we make these assumptions that we're designing for this person. And I think then you miss these opportunities to really broaden that and see, who are we designing for, and how come some people don't want to use our product? Go to the extreme user, why? How come they don't want to do it this way? And what can we learn from that, so that, again, we can go back to the drawing board and iterate and provide something that they do need. Which I think is the interesting point, which is why the bottom up works so well.
Mm-hmm.